Welcome to Your Need to Know. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and today we're going to be talking about registering high school students to vote here in Fairfax County. My guest today is Beth Tudan, which is Romanian, as
Yes.
I have come to understand. Tell us a little bit about how you came to this particular project. You are the director of the League of Women Voters here in Fairfax.
That's right.
I belong to that particular unit.
Yes.
But what brought you to this idea long before we knew who Emma Gonzalez and who David Hogg were?
Right. Yes.
Before we knew about this youth movement, how did you come to this idea that there could be a collaboration between the League of Women Voters and the schools to register high school students?
Well, it's something that the League often does. It does just throughout the country, goes in to register students to vote. So the League will be 100 years old in 2020. So we were founded by the suffragists after they fought for women to get the right to vote. Then they said, all right, let's have a way to educate women so they can make their own decisions about voting. So sure, they can decide to vote like their husband or brother or father, whatever, but we want them to have enough information. So the League has continued to do that. Our big push is for voter education, voter registration and such. We produce voter guides throughout the country. They're completely nonpartisan. Really, we have this something called vote411.org, and we have our voters guides on there, and we create the questions locally, and then the candidates go and enter in their information themselves. And so we don't edit it or anything, but then voters can look it up. But with voter registration, I was just curious what we did with the high schools. So I'm a former high school government teacher, and I thought, well, this would be great. And then I found out that the Board of Elections often goes into the schools, but that I talked to FCPS and they said in the League also. So it turned out that my oldest graduated in 2015 from an FCPS school, and he didn't get registered. So that got me curious, well, what's going on? And then talking to people at various schools, it seemed there was a lot of confusion thinking kids were getting registered, but they weren't. Some were, some weren't. There could be one school where a teacher was completely had this program that he had developed and it went really well, but maybe he retired, and then does it get replicated?
So this was a bit uneven.
Yes.
Uneven.
Yes.
And it seems to me that were relying on government teachers.
Yes.
To be the people who either push this forward or...
Well, I think part of the problem is that it's not part of the curriculum. So yes, people thought it was getting done, but it wasn't necessarily. So even within the same high school, at my son's high school, my son said he didn't know, he hadn't heard. Then I talked to I thought, well, maybe you missed the memo. So I talked to another student, and she said, oh yeah, my teacher said Google it. And then I talked to another student with a different teacher, and his teacher had brought in laptops to every student. So even within the same school,
everybody was approaching it differently.
It was just it was scattershot. That I was speaking to a student at another school, and he said he had registered, and I said, great, where? And he said, in the lunchroom. I said, oh, did a group come in? Because FCPS is very specific about what groups can come in. And they need to be nonpartisan and that sort of thing. And he said, oh no, my teacher said to Google it, so I was in the lunchroom, so I registered on my phone.
Wow.
And I said, well, I don't know
wow.
if that counts. Yes, it counts, but it wasn't that he took the initiative to do that.
Right.
And others, the teachers were doing quite a bit. So it's not part of the curriculum. So I started wondering, well, what can we do? So I talked to various groups and talked to the League in Arlington to see what they do. So now they've shared a lot of their information with us. So we've now developed a script based on what they've done and some best practices from Houston and from Auburn, Alabama, and LWVUS and such, so that now we have this, and now we are going in to register students as well.
So isn't Virginia one of only 2 states that allow outside organizations to come in?
No, Virginia is one that allows groups to have a unique URL.
Ah, that's what it is, a unique URL, because this is a great segue into how you've tried to add a little bit of competitiveness
Yes,
among
exactly.
the high schools in Fairfax County, because a lot of kids respond and they've got school spirit.
Yes.
And now you've kind of created a place where people can see how many students per school have registered.
Right.
So it's the unique URL.
Yes. So Virginia is one of 2 states that allows a group like the League of Women Voters to have a unique URL. And I was taking the test that we have to take every year to be allowed to register to vote, and I noticed that their unique URL held LWV, and I said, oh, so they already were thinking that we would be the one of them to get it. So I contacted them, and we were able to get it. So now all across Virginia, we have it. Ours ends in LWV Fairfax, and we then have just added a / Woodson High School or Madison High School or something like that, so that. And on our web page about high school voter registration, all the 27 high schools, including the alternative schools and such, are listed there. So any student can go on there and click it, and they can register.
Right, and there's one that has all of them listed. I think that's specifically for parents.
There's a separate one because we didn't want them
totals to be
registering
skewed.
to mess. So we said, okay, if there's an alumni, a teacher, fan of the school or whatever,
somebody
they
just
can
is
use
curious
this.
About it, right?
Right, and so those we had the Annandale Adams, for instance. I thought that was a great mascot. So
yeah, I think it's fantastic.
Reflects the sign when they were created. So
you've put it online, and as you said, now I'm fascinated by the fact that someone says they registered on their phone. I mean, that's such a young person thing to do.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So what we've done is, with those, on our website, we have all the different criteria about registering to vote. You obviously have to be a U.S. citizen. To register in Virginia, you need to be a Virginia resident. If there's someone who's from a military family, we say, have you asked your parents? Because they may want you to be registered in Texas or Alaska or something like that. And here's the URL, you can go register at home. They need to have their full social security number too, which we've learned, a teacher pointed out, because kids don't have it, it's on the common application. So one problem we were having going into the classroom, even though we said, please bring in your social, they often didn't have it. And so now that they can look it up on their common app, they can do it. If they have a driver's license or a learner's permit, their identification's already been verified in the system, so they can register to vote online.
That's amazing.
And if not, they can start the registration, then they have to print it out and mail it in. So when we go into the classrooms, we will bring in the voter registration forms.
Right.
And we also, so people can register on paper, or they can register online. So
for years, the DMV has been registering people, except
because of the motor voter law, right?
Right, motor voter law. But that doesn't always work, because I think that was a paper-based system rather than electronic. I'm not sure what the problem was, but there were people who were like, they said they were going to do it at the DMV, and then it turns out they're not registered to vote.
Yes. So that motor voter law was from the 90s, and it's a great thing to be able to register at the DMV because it does reach so many people. Now, we don't pre-register. Some states, they'll pre-register at 16 and then you can vote later, but we don't. But I'm a chief election officer, so when there are problems, people are sent to me, and I hate it when someone says, oh, I registered at the DMV.
And they're not in the system.
Right, and we can usually track it. I make calls and they can track it, and they can figure out whether that person registered in time and there was just a glitch, and maybe but they do have to get a provisional ballot in the meantime, and you hope that it ends up counting. But actually, so the league started working with the DMV and the registrars, and when was that, 2016? And the DMV system is well improved now. I was just looking on I think it was Brennan, I believe, Brennan or Pew. One of them had actually just published something about how Virginia's DMV is so much better.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Because, it does vary from state to state about how and who and when you can register to vote. I think Oregon is now automatically registering everyone to vote.
Yes.
Which is very unique.
Alaska, actually Arkansas, There are quite a few states that are doing that, yeah.
But we're not there yet in Virginia, which is why your project is so incredibly important, because yeah, unless kids intentionally, young people intentionally register at the appropriate time and the appropriate method with the appropriate information, they are not registered to vote on election day. And we have a lot of election days in Virginia.
Every year.
Every year. And that's,
Virginia is for voters.
Oh, you know, we have primaries and we have municipal elections.
Special elections.
Oh, yes, indeed. And so, you know, I don't know, again, if that's covered in the government or civics curriculum here in Virginia. I don't, you know, my kids are so far out of school, I don't know if they talk about how Virginia is unique that way, but there are many opportunities.
I think a lot of the government teachers bring it up. But what we've done with the league is we've developed a flyer that has the information on the front. It has, so about voter registration. So it has the different qualifications one needs, and then on the back it has a bunch of questions. And so on that, they're questions so that, and that I had a bunch of different league people. I was saying 500, 600 years of election experience. We're reviewing all of this, so that kids would know certain things, because they think that they register in Fairfax at home and they go to Williamsburg, and election day they show up
at the poll in Williamsburg.
At the poll in Williamsburg, or in Newport News or Charlottesville or Blacksburg, and they think they can vote, and they can't. It is not like an ATM.
Right, and it's not universal. Just because you registered online doesn't mean it means you can vote anywhere in Virginia.
Right, so exactly. And others will end up registering on campus, and that will then invalidate their one
other
here.
Registration.
And they have the right in Virginia, they have the right to register, you know, in Williamsburg or here.
But only one or the other, not both.
They can only vote in one place, and they only will be registered in one place. So we're also asking them to double, triple check their registration before they go vote, because they think they don't realize, and then they're trying to get home or trying to get back to school, depending, you know, whatever the day is. And so we're just trying, and that happens to adults too.
It does, but when you've got kids in college, that's a unique situation.
Yes.
So they really do have to be informed, and they have to know before every election day, especially primaries, because our primaries are in June, you know, and in June they're home. They're not at school.
Exactly.
Right, so they need to understand where they're registered to vote, so they show up at the appropriate polling place, or they vote absentee in person. Right? You can vote in person if you're not going to be at your polling place, and that you need some time ahead of time to do that.
Right.
And speaking of time ahead of time to do that, we are going to take a break.
Okay.
We're gonna come back in a few minutes and talk again with Beth Tudan about the registration for high school students here in Fairfax County. This is something that is much in the news lately, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as well when we return. Welcome back to Your Need to Know. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and today we're talking about registering high school students to vote here in Fairfax County and actually all across Virginia. Joining me is Beth Tudan, who is the president of the League of Women Voters Fairfax. She is also the president of the Fairfax County Council of PTAs.
Right.
Oh, boy, that is a long one.
Yes.
And so putting those two interests together, and in your leadership role, you have found a way to kind of raise up the visibility of this issue.
Right.
When we went on break, we were talking a little bit about how you were trying to meet the specific needs of college students. And you have done that.
Yes. So this has been in collaboration not only with the Fairfax League, but with the Virginia League. We have looked to see what are the different issues that face college students. And so part of it is not realizing that they can only vote in one place. So we have developed a web page on our website about it and all sorts of things that they need to know. And one is, my son say this isn't a good idea, but I think it is, that for a high school graduation gift, you could give a book of stamps in case they're going to bring it.
Yeah, it's kind of old school, Mom, but okay.
Yeah. Well, so my son, my oldest, when he went off to college out of state in the fall of 2015, he was voting for the first time, and he called me, which scared me because he called, he didn't text. So that's a major
red flag. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that.
Yes. So what is it? And he said, Mom, and he was upset. And I said, what happened? And he said, what? I need a stamp. He said, what? And so it turns out he had his absentee ballot. He needed to mail it in. He needed a stamp. And then he went on and on about how that's a poll tax.
Yeah, right. Only young people.
Yes. And then he wanted to know where he could get a stamp. So.
Oh, yeah. What a good question. If you've never bought them before.
Right. But to mail back an absentee ballot in Virginia, it has to be, you have to complete it. You have to seal the envelope. You have to sign the envelope. You have to have a witness and a stamp. And you can only have one voter registration form in the envelope. You can't have yours and your roommates. You can't have two in there. You have to have just one. Otherwise, it won't get accepted. And it has to be received by Election Day, as we know from what just happened in Fredericksburg.
Goodness, yes.
Right. So that, or you can vote in person. So we're saying for kids, if they happen to be home for fall break in the fall, that's a great time for them to try to vote in person. That's easier.
But it requires pre-planning, right?
It
They're not
does.
thinking, because they actually open the in-person voting, I don't even, 2 months ahead of time?
It's quite early,
It's quite early,
yeah.
but that requires students to actually be thinking about the election way before the election when they're home.
And that's a good point. Research shows that we also need to ask anyone, when are you going to vote? How are you going to vote?
Do you have a plan
Where are you
for
going
voting?
to vote? What is your plan? And that greatly increases turnout.
Yeah, the likelihood that they'll actually do it.
Right. And with high school students, something that a lot of people don't realize is that you can register to vote in Virginia at age 17. If you will be 18 by the next election. Therefore, the majority of high school seniors will be 18 after the November election each year. So this year, it's November 6, 2000. If the birthday is on or before that, they can register. They can also vote in a primary. So the June 12th primary that's coming up, they'll be able to vote there. And if there's a special election, last year we had a special election for school board. So 17-year-olds were able to vote in that as well.
Which is fantastic.
Yes.
And I just think, a lot of this is not top of mind for them. A lot of people think elections are only in November and they don't think about the primaries. In Virginia, we don't have registered parties.
That's exactly
So you
right.
can vote when you decide to vote in a primary. You're not registered to vote either as a Republican or a Democrat or as an independent.
Right.
You can go and you get to choose whatever ballot you want.
That's
and so,
right.
I think a lot of young people also need to understand it's important to show up to primaries because your candidate doesn't ever get on the ballot if you don't show up to make sure they get on the general election ballot.
That's very true. Yeah.
So there's a lot of nuances to this. And
Right.
so talk a little bit about how you tried to motivate these young people to get excited about registering to vote and all of the rights and privileges thereto.
Well, with our script, which we borrowed from Arlington, the League in Arlington, and also we were working with Inspire Virginia, which is another group that's focusing on registration in Virginia. So we have a script that we encourage people to. Basically, it shows how many people are registered, so only half of the youth are registered, and then only half show up. So a quarter of the youth in general, and this is 2016, a presidential year result, only a quarter are really showing up. So we want to show them that although they may have the numbers, if they're not voting, if they're not registering and then voting, that's really something. So because we're nonpartisan, though, we don't come in to talk about the issues to motivate them to vote as much as letting them know that their vote is their voice.
Right. That is the key.
Yeah.
That is the key. And I think there's been a recent movement following a tremendous tragedy in Parkland, Florida.
Yes, that's right.
But what this has translated into is, I was down on the mall on Pennsylvania Avenue to see so many young people out there who are suddenly kind of like voting, yes, voting.
Right.
And it's terrible that it took a tragedy. However, out of that, every single speaker that day was a young person, as young as 11 years old.
Yes.
I think actually Renata King, Martin Luther King's granddaughter, is like 9.
Yes, I think so.
9 years old.
They were
Every
amazing.
speaker was a young person.
Yes.
And so this to me is like raising up the importance of this as a youth movement.
Right.
Like your mom can tell you you should register to vote, but when your classmates and everybody around you is saying, our vote is our voice. Like
Right.
this, we can make a difference. We can impact public
Right.
policy, and this is how we do it.
Yes.
This is just astonishing.
Right.
You know, I never thought, you know, Emma Gonzalez and David Hogg have become household names. When you say
Right,
those
they
names,
have.
you see their faces and you know who they are.
Right, right.
This is like, I think it's a very exciting time for you to be rolling out this project, having put it all into place well before any of this happened.
Right, yes, it was not tied to that at all, but we have done various things. So we're also finding that going into the classroom, it's great, but there, for instance, we were just at Woodson, there were 500 seniors, but 100 of them were not in government as seniors. And in the IB schools, like at South Lakes,
Right.
they also they take classes sophomore, junior, senior. So just going into the government classes is not going to be as effective.
Right.
So we'll go into the lunchroom. So we have developed I have teenage sons. So I asked them, well, what would you want to play? So they said they like the spinning wheel game and the drop disc game. So we got those, and we've developed questions, and we have them on cards and things. The kids will spin, and it's 8, and so it asks questions about voter, some of these things about can you vote in any place you want?
Right.
And
Testing their knowledge.
testing their knowledge and getting them to think about it. Some of them are easy. How old do you have to be to register? Well, that can be 17, right?
Right.
So or do you have to be a U.S. citizen? Yes.
Yes.
So those are easy, but then others are getting them more to think about the process, and so that they will vote. Where can you get nonpartisan voter information?
Right.
How do you make your decision? So that we can then talk to them about some of those.
Well, it'll be interesting, not just in the registration figures, which I will be very interested to see, because I'm assuming you will have something you're going to put out once the last day of school is over.
Right. So what we found out was that last year there were about 1,600 students who were registered to vote, and during the school. But there are 12,000 seniors.
12,000, and you
Right,
had,
and CPS, and there were 1,600. So this year we're estimating there are already about 3,500 who are registered. Now, not all are U.S. citizens. Others may register in other states, but still, there are a lot more who are not
Right.
registered yet. So we are then doing a social media campaign. We're working with one of our new millennial members who's developing one for Snapchat and Instagram. We have members who are creating graphic for every school so that the kids can take a photo with it, with the
Great. Yes.
Hayfield Hawks and
Right.
Such, so that they can use that to Snapchat. Because one student was about to Snapchat the voter registration form,
Right.
or snap it.
Right.
Snap it. And that has their social
Security number,
number
so don't do
and
that.
all of that. And
Don't- yeah.
so, but they're not used to dealing with the information yet. So we're like, no, let's not do that.
Yeah.
Let's think, so just to have this, that they can snap that and share
And there's a
it.
lot of school spirit along with that.
There is. So we've got, and also when they actually go vote, that will encourage their other friends to go
Right.
vote as well. So we're wanting to do that. And we do have a challenge for every school, so we're hoping that the numbers, that will encourage them. But really the goal is for one Fairfax or everyone to get registered as much as possible.
Absolutely. But it will be interesting to see as far as a percentage of their eligible students and what percentage are registered to vote at the end of the
Right.
year. I think one of the things that really came out of the rally that was in D.C. too is the low number of young people who vote in midterm elections.
That's right.
Midterms. And
Yes.
that's what in 2018, that's what we have. It's congressional elections.
Right.
And so
Right.
very, very low turnout. So these are your representatives in Congress. And in Virginia, we have a senatorial,
Right.
we have a U.S. Senate seat that is
Right.
up for
Right,
re-election.
yes.
So there has to be a connecting of the dots between public policy, people who run for office, and the people who actually show up at the polls.
Right.
Like, to get to better public policy, you must go through these steps.
Right. And that's one thing that we do with our exercise, that, we have something about voting that, it's just with pizza, that maybe the younger people want cheese and the older people want mushrooms, But,
Right.
but if you don't vote, if the younger don't turn out, you're going to get mushrooms.
Yeah, and that's what
so-
happens. You tend to
Yeah.
find that the greatest generation, certainly the boomer generation, vote in every election,
They
every
do.
time, every
Absolutely.
primary, every time.
And so their voices are heard, so much that we have in Virginia, with we just do not invest enough in public education. We don't invest as much in higher education.
All things that you would think these young people would care about.
And, you know, as a result, we have higher student loans and things like that. So we do want them to realize that if they're not showing up, then their priorities are not, and in numbers.
And in numbers enough to influence
Right.
who is sitting in those seats. You know,
Right.
you talk about college tuition and the student debt crisis, and you talk
Right.
about things like transportation and affordable housing.
Right.
Like the way you get to better public policy is you show up to vote for the people who represent your views.
Exactly, exactly. And one reason why we have the League and the Fairfax County PTA have collaborated is that we want to reach as many students as possible. And one way to reach them is to reach through the parents and teachers and such. And so just getting the teachers union to speak about it, because they're on the Fairfax County, both unions are represented on the Fairfax County PTA board. The parents, you know, obviously
Right.
that they're getting it just to share it. We're also having, we're putting ads on Facebook about it and trying to get out. We have our red clipboards that we are going around to places because, you know, talking to kids, finding out that they're not registered, just getting them to register right there. You know, it doesn't have to be a certain thing. And really, if they already have a driver's license or a learner's permit, it takes 5 minutes online.
Well,
They can
I
go
so appreciate
quickly.
you being here, Beth, to let all of us know what we need to know about getting young people registered to vote in Fairfax County and in Virginia.